Uhuru!
Uhuru!
Uhuru! Welcome to the Reparations Study Group. I am Jackson, a proud member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and I am here with two incredible revolutionaries in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and African People's Solidarity Committee. With me in the room is Jesse Nevel here, the National Chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and joining us via audio is Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. So I appreciate and salute both of you. Uhuru. And the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, we are under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. We are formed and led by them. And we are the mass organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the cadre organization of white people under the leadership of the African Revolution. And so we are studying the Burning Spear newspaper. We are studying Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party versus the Counterinsurgency on page 11 of your December issue of the Burning Spear newspaper. And before we start, I want to salute the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party. So here is the front cover of your December issue. And then you turn to page 8, where you see the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party, with Chairman Omali Yeshitela front and center here. And so Chairman Omali Yeshitela is the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and African Socialist International, and his latest book is Vanguard, the Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution. And you can get your Burning Spear newspaper and Vanguard at Burning Spear Marketplace, as well as Overturning the Culture of Violence by Chairwoman Penny Hess, who we had the honor of interviewing tonight. So you definitely want to check out both of those. And I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, who is the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, the economic programs of the Uhuru movement, building a liberated African economy. And all the reparations that we raise in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement go to the Black Power Blueprint. And so I just want to salute Onezene Yeshitela. And then lastly, Akile Anayi, who is the Director of Agitation and Propaganda of the African People's Socialist Party, and therefore the Editor-in-Chief of the Burning Spear newspaper. So we study the Burning Spear newspaper because it tells the truth, from the perspective of the Black working class, reports on the conditions and struggles of oppressed peoples. It is biased in favor of the African working class. It does not, condone, does not include, any kind of white power, propaganda, etc. This is in favor of the Black working class. And as white people, we can be in solidarity with Black power through the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and African People's Solidarity Committee. So without further ado, I want to dive into our article tonight by Chairwoman Penny, and I want to introduce Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Uhuru. So exciting to be here. And I really thank you, Jackson, and Chair Jesse of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And I just, really want to join in saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, and Editor Akile Anayi of the Burning Spear newspaper. And it's just an honor to be here and to be a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee. So, the chairman gives a political education session every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock on Eastern Time. And he's talked a lot about the question of counterinsurgency. And it's something that even in this past week where there were questions, this question of counterinsurgency is always there, and the chairman has been in the forefront of defining and really letting us understand what counterinsurgency is in this period of the crisis of imperialism. And the chairman has shown that counterinsurgency is an attack on colonized peoples when they rise up. If you really, think about it, and truly, I can't think of any time where the word insurgency, which is what the U.S. government and military uses to define the uprising, the resistance, or even the revolutionary war of oppressed and colonized peoples. But I cannot remember an instance in which the U.S. military and government uses the word insurgency if white people were in some kind of uprising or in some kind of even struggle. It's just not used. It's used for colonized people, and the question of counterinsurgency is something that has been defined by and honed. The strategy of it has been honed through the ongoing attacks against colonized people, which was what built and is the foundation of parasitic capitalism and U.S. imperialism. And, we look at the world today, and the U.S. has been waging a counterinsurgency against the people of Afghanistan now for 18 years, and almost that amount against the people of Iraq. And you can see that the struggles are still going on, that the U.S. has not been able to crush the resistance of the peoples of the Middle East. It keeps rising up. It keeps coming about. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is the only political leader who defined the reality that the attack against the Black Revolution of the 1960s was a counterinsurgency, and that everything about it was what the U.S. does to any oppressed and colonized people around the world. And that I think that one of the reasons that the chairman was able to define that is because he has always analyzed through political theory of African internationalism that African people, wherever they are around the world, are colonized people, including inside the borders of the United States. And that's not that many people accept that, because the mainstream U.S. definition of the oppression of African people is racism, is that African people are victims of racism, the ideas in white people's heads. But the U.S. government does not wage a counterinsurgency against a race or even a struggle against racism. It wages a counterinsurgency against an anti-colonial struggle. And I think that this is really key in terms of, what we're talking about as being members of a white solidarity organization that was founded by the African People's Socialist Party, because the chairman and African internationalism recognize that all white people are part of the colonizer nation. So therefore, if there's the colonized African and others inside the borders of the United States, the indigenous and the Spanish-speaking indigenous people as well, then there's a colonizer, and white people are the colonizer nation. And so, that's why that we have to understand that this counterinsurgency is going on right here, this war, this unacknowledged war against African people inside the borders of the United States, and that it is an anti-colonial struggle that the African People's Socialist Party is building, an anti-colonial struggle, building a liberated African anti-colonial economy, and the struggle for dual and contending power that, that the party is putting on in the form of the Black Power Blueprint and all of the 50 institutions of the African People's Socialist Party, the economic institutions that guide and are basically the foundation for all of the party's political activity. That's why the party says the political and economic are one. But I just wanted to say that, the chairman is the only force out there today that is putting out the science of revolution, the theory of African internationalism, the organization that is a disciplined and ironclad organization led by the African working class based on democratic centralism, which is basically the practical manifestation of the party's theory. So, it's really a powerful thing to realize that Chairman Omali Shatella is making history every single day. So, he is the one that is out there bringing the world to this question that nothing can change imperialism except a scientific revolutionary struggle led by the African working class in unity with all oppressed and colonized peoples and all freedom-loving people, including people from the white community, in a strategic, long-term struggle to bring down U.S. imperialism once and for all and establish the liberation of Africa and African people as the victory for oppressed and colonized peoples everywhere. So, it's an honor to be under the leadership, to be fighting for reparations to African people, which is our front that we're assigned to. This is who we are. This is our brand as the African People Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, that we are there to return the stolen resources, which in and of itself is a strategy of the African working class and is something that will and does sabotage and undermine the power of parasitic capitalism itself. So I'm just going to begin reading, and we can discuss afterwards, or people could interrupt me if they want and say something. But I'll just begin, unless there's something else that somebody would like to say.
No, just really salute you, Chairman Penny. Jesse, anything you would like to say?
No, I really appreciate the overview.
Okay, so
I do want to give a shout out to some people tuning in. We have Ron from Seattle. We have Tama Gadini. We have Damien, who we met at USF a while ago. Casey Mackey, Renee Santosh, and other people who haven't posted anything, so I can't see their names, but salute all of you tuning in on YouTube and Facebook. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Wow, it's so great to be with all of you comrades on this program. So Uhuru, and I'm so glad that you tuned into this. So, all right, so I'm going to begin the article, Chairman Omali Shatella and the African People's Socialist Party versus the Counterinsurgency. And if you're reading the December issue of the Burning Spear, it's on page 11 under the column that we do from ATSD every month called White Solidarity with Black Power. So it says, today, African people inside the borders of the United States face conditions as brutal, violent, and life-threatening as perhaps any time in their history. It is incredible to know that 1 out of every 8 people in prison in the entire world is an African person in this country. Or that in the city of Boston, the average white family has 31,000 times the resources of an African family. That is $250,000 in assets versus $8 for Africans. Or that due to the staggering death and imprisonment rates, there are 1.5 million African men, quote, missing from African communities, so that for every 100 African women in the U.S., there are only 83 African men. What is commonly accepted by the international community as genocide is alive and well and fully in effect right here before our eyes. From the 1950s to the early 1970s, though, the heroic resistance and revolutionary struggle of African people inside the borders of the U.S. inspired all of humanity and gave confidence to anti-colonial movements for national liberation on every continent. the fight, the strategy, the revolutionary articulations, and moral high ground, not to mention the brilliant military strategy of the African Revolution of the 1960s inside this country, gave leadership to their comrade African revolutionaries in their homeland, the continent of Africa, and in the Caribbean. The Black Revolution was upheld by the Vietnamese, the Chinese, the Cubans, and so many others, knowing that their enemy, the greatest imperialist and military force on the planet, was being besieged and weakened, from within by the poor and oppressed African working class on the streets in places like Detroit, Los Angeles, and St. Petersburg, Florida. The African Revolution forced the U.S. to defend themselves both at home and abroad. As African People's Socialist Party Chairman Omali Yeshitela wrote in this period, we know that the Black Revolution, once unleashed, gave rise to virtually every other progressive entity that sprung up in this country. It was the Black Revolution that took white women out of the kitchen and homosexuals out of the closet. It was the Black Revolution that energized the movements of other oppressed peoples, including indigenous people in this country. It was a powerful and profound movement that shook this country to its very foundation. So what happened to that earth-shattering movement? As Chairman Omali Yeshitela sums up in his brilliant book, Vanguard, The Advanced Detachment to the African Revolution, contrary to the ruling class lies, the African working class did not suddenly develop a preference for heroin and crack cocaine, poverty, homelessness, police murder, and years in prison over self-determination and political power. We did not abandon our children or willingly turn them over to their kidnappers in the U.S. foster care and prison system. We did not gladly give up our power and leadership to the African petty bourgeoisie, the neo-colonial class, unquote. Where no one else could explain what happened to the African Revolution of the 60s, Chairman Omali Yeshitela made it clear. It was counterinsurgency, the murderous military response from the U.S. government that crushed the movement, and that counterinsurgency is very much in force today. The chairman writes in Vanguard, quote, we, the African People's Socialist Party, are the singular voice that waged tireless political struggle and fierce on-the-ground campaigns, showing that the demise of our courageous movement of the 60s was brought about by a violent and devastating U.S. government counteroffensive known in military terms as counterinsurgency, unquote. What is counterinsurgency? Insurgency is the U.S. military term for a revolution against colonial domination. As the U.S. military's counterinsurgency manual defines it, quote, insurgency is an organized, protracted political military struggle designed to weaken the control and legitimacy of an established government occupying power or other political authority while increasing insurgent control. So that is really, really, really clear that it is a struggle to defeat the occupying colonial domination, the foreign and alien state power over an oppressed and colonized people, while at the same time building and expanding the power of the colonized people who are rising up and fighting revolution. Because the revolutionary forces do not have the ability to directly engage the U.S. military with all its bombs, missiles, arms, soldiers, and drones, guerrilla or irregular warfare is used to wear down the enemy and make the oppressors lose their will to struggle. The anti-colonial fighter has only two advantages over the imperialists and must use them to the max. The revolutionary must be based firmly in the masses of the oppressed people so that the entire people and the revolutionaries are one. And the revolutionaries must be tied to the winning political line manifested in ironclad organization. The political theory of African internationalism and the democratic centralist discipline of the African People's Socialist Party, grounded in a half a century of tireless struggle in the African working class, is what makes the party the revolutionary vanguard, the true revolutionary force capable of liberating Africa and African people and destroying imperialism once and for all. Revolutionaries exploit the weaknesses of imperialism, creating dual and contending power that shows the oppressed workers that they can govern themselves. They polarize the entire colonizer population from the ruling class to the working people, forcing the oppressor nations to stand in solidarity or run for cover. They attack and disappear, never engaging in a fight they can't win. In short, revolutionaries drive the colonial forces crazy. This is why guerrilla warfare is called the War of the Flea, an analogy to clusters of tiny insects that can bring down a big, powerful dog. The only thing in the colonial state, the only thing the colonial state can do to fight the anti-colonial revolution is to impose drastic, vicious measures on the entire population to try to salt the earth to make sure the people will never try to rise up again. The U.S. manual defines counterinsurgency as, quote, military, paramilitary, political, economic, psychological, and civic actions taken by a government to defeat insurgency. In other words, there is no adherence to the Geneva Conventions or any protocols for taking of prisoners and the protection of civilians that are used in wars between Europeans. Counterinsurgency is a war without terms. As the introduction to the 1960s book, The War of the Flea, How Guerrilla Fighters Could Take Over the World by Robert Tabor, which is really an interesting book and should be read by everybody. He summed up, there is only one means of defeating an insurgent people who will not surrender, and that is extermination. There is only one way to control a territory that harbors resistance, and that is turn it into a desert, where these means cannot, for whatever reason, be used. The war is lost. Counterinsurgency is a war on every aspect of the lives of African people. Counterinsurgency programs came from the FBI, such as COINTELPRO, and the CIA, Operation Chaos, including its MK Ultra mind control program, as well as the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, and National Institute of Health, among many others. The U.S. government stated in its COINTELPRO documents, the Black Revolution of the 60s was the greatest threat to the internal security of the U.S. since the Civil War. The opportunist white left didn't get it. The neo-colonialists didn't get it. But the U.S. government was crystal clear about the fact that the leadership of the revolutionary thrust inside this country was poor and oppressed African workers rising up from coast to coast. The government placed agents in the district attorney's office, the police and sheriff's departments, and probation officers in the courtrooms, law firms, universities, churches, in neighborhoods, precincts, and on draft boards. Agent provocateurs were assigned to infiltrate every African organization, large and small. The CIA and FBI assigned operatives and recruited informants in impoverished African and Mexican communities in the mid-60s. Their tactics were to engender a fundamental change in basic moral, religious, or political matters. In other words, to make African workers carry out horizontal violence, even in violation of their beliefs. That is really important. That is what one of the first operations of Operation Chaos, CIA counterinsurgent program, went into the African working class neighborhoods of Oakland, California, and created and used different kinds of drugs and other techniques to force the community to carry out actions that went against their moral beliefs. Their moral and political beliefs, I should say. So, where I was here, in other words, counterinsurgency used massive slander and spread disinformation, fomenting hostility between organizations. It manufactured charges against African leaders and politicians and regularly executed highly visible, brutal, and demoralizing assassinations of beloved leaders, including Patrice Lumumba in Congo and Malcolm X in the U.S. It locked up political leaders until death. Black Panther leader Sundiata Acoli is still in prison today, along with Jalil Abdul Muntakim, who has been locked up for 48 years. Assata Shakur, who escaped to Cuba in the 1970s, still has a $2 million bounty on her head. Counterinsurgency scorched the ground with well-documented imposition of deadly drugs, heroin, and laboratory-created crack cocaine, crafted to serve a particularly destructive chemical purpose in the brains of African people to break down the infrastructure of African society. There was a frenzy of prison building and expansion of police forces to accommodate the flood of government-imposed drugs with mass arrests of African people. Thousands of African people are still serving mandatory life sentences in the colonial prisons, up to 500 times greater than those given to white people. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela has made clear, counterinsurgency includes the destruction of the African community's economy, substituting it with an imposed drug economy. The only way to put food on the table or pay the rent is with drug money. It also involves, quote, urban renewal, gentrification, imposed poverty with no way out, creating conscious conditions to engender horizontal violence, self-destruction, and despair. It includes integration of public schools, of colonial public schools, which are now filled with cops and brutal teachers, and federal grants to maintain failing grades. Counterinsurgency is centered around police programs such as Hope 6, community policing, opportunity zones, neighborhood watch programs, niche programs, and militarized police and SWAT forces that act like what they are, an occupying army gunning down another African person every 18 hours. A people under counterinsurgency means every African parent lives in dread of what could happen to their children at the hands of killer cops. Counterinsurgency includes the endless slander on TV, in newspapers, movies, and shows, demonizing, criminalizing, and vilifying African people on every front. It is Wells Fargo's ghetto loans doling out subprime mortgages to millions of African homeowners, sending them into mass foreclosure with the greatest loss of wealth in the last 100 years. Counterinsurgency is administered and profited from by neo-colonialists, white power and blackface, who carry out the interests of the parasitic capitalist white power and who are backed and often funded by the white left and liberals to maintain the imperialist status quo. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of the multifaceted counterinsurgency waged against African people every day of their lives. Only Chairman Omali Yeshitela has single-handedly defined this military assault on the African Revolution of the 60s, naming it for what it is, counterinsurgency, the military and ideological defeat of the African Revolution that must continue to be fought and which must win if African people are ever to know happiness, independence, and socialist power. Chairman O'Malley has struggled around this question of counterinsurgency for his entire political life and throughout the 48-year history of the African People's Socialist Party. He took on powerful ideological struggles with African forces who collaborated with the counterinsurgency and ideologically defeated the white left, who collaborated with and opportunistically built itself at the expense of the African liberation movement. The chairman has single-handedly fought to complete the African Revolution of the 1960s in his lifetime. The chairman was able to do that because the theory of African internationalism shows that African people are colonized inside the U.S. The chairman has proved that the U.S. imposes counterinsurgency on a struggle against colonialism anywhere in the world, not in the struggle against racism. As Chairman O'Malley has made clear, African people are not a race, but a nation of people forcibly dispersed around the world. Informed by his political theory of African internationalism, the chairman created a revolutionary strategy way back in 1977, still in use today, and it is winning. He kept revolutionary alive in the whole world. The revolution alive in the whole world. He exposed and pushed back the counterinsurgency. He built the African Socialist International, alive and growing on the continent of Africa and throughout the world. He fought for every inch of political space, built countless African working class-led economic institutions and mass organizations. He extended the African Revolution into the belly of white society, existing the African People's Solidarity Committee. He made reparations a household word, defining it as a revolutionary demand used to indict the colonial U.S. government in the first tribunal on reparations for African people in 1982. Chairman O'Malley and the African People's Socialist Party have struggled as the primary custodian of the African liberation struggle. We have summed up all the lessons and contradictions of our movement. This is a quote. I'm sorry, this is a quote. The primary custodian of the African liberation struggle, we, meaning the African People's Socialist Party, have summed up all the lessons and contradictions of our revolutionary movement to reunite the African nation and liberate and unite Africa and African people worldwide under the leadership of the African working class. The party has ensured that this time around, African people will win. Indeed, they are winning. White people have the opportunity to be part of this incredible historic trajectory of the final defeat of imperialism and parasitic capitalism that will usher in the liberation of Africa and all oppressed peoples. Be part of creating a world without war, injustice, oppressors, and the oppressed by getting organized under the leadership of the African People's Working Class Party. Join the African People's Solidarity Committee or the Uhuru Solidarity Movement under the leadership of the party. Fight for reparations to African people. Unity through reparations.
Uhuru.
I really salute Chairman Penny. Thank you so much. I want to, dive into some questions. But first, I want to appreciate our moderator, Johan Bedingfield, who is, tuning in as well from Clearwater, Florida, and Valerie Bronte, who is tuning in from New York. And also salute the comrades in the room. Yes, we have our incredible engineer, Kyle Weiss, and we have Amanda Carlozzi here with us from APSC and USM. And just want to salute all of these incredible comrades. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru.
And I want to say that if people have a comment or question, you can, leave it in the comments on Facebook or YouTube, but you can also call in and, salute Chairman Penny vocally and ask your comments or ask your questions, make your comments about the study tonight. And that number is 727-537-9171. That's 727-537-9171. And we can hear your voice in this study and have a real conversation about this article and with Chairman Penny. Uhuru. So, Chairman Penny, before we, go into some, prepared questions, do you have anything you would like to, comment on before we do that?
Well, I think that that actually, I'm sorry, I'm just getting called from the chairman, but it's all right. So I think that, this question of counterinsurgency is really, really critical to, that white people have to recognize it, that we have been complicit with the counterinsurgency. And the counterinsurgency is part and parcel of colonialism, as we've said. And it means that it could not happen against, a government could not wage a counterinsurgency against oppressed and colonized people without the participation of the colonizer nation. And so we ourselves have inflicted the most hideous and heinous violence against African people in the form of lynchings, burnings, terror, and things that go on every single day. The medical, on the medical front, all of just terrorism, torture, mutilation that we have participated in, built careers around, that are based on just, a vicious assault on African people. And so, it's just so critical what the chairman has raised, that because because of capitalism was born from the assault on Africa and African people, on the genocide of the indigenous people, and colonialism around the world, all white people are part of the colonizer nation. All white people sit on the pedestal of the oppression of African people. That is where, that's what has given us, quote, our future. As the chairman says, every dream, every aspiration, every invention, everything that we have is stolen from African people and rests on the pedestal of the most incredible suffering and violence that the world has ever known. And so this question of counterinsurgency is key, and it's something that we, if we're committed to the question of if we're committed to the question of reparations, we have to fight for the understanding of counterinsurgency. So, and that the counterinsurgency must go, and that African people are colonized people inside the borders of the United States and have a right to their freedom, independence, and every cent that belongs to them.
Uhuru. Complete unity, Chairman Penny, and I really appreciate you diving into that, how the counterinsurgency could not exist, could not keep going without our complicity back in the 60s and today as well, we in the white community. So I wanted to follow that up with what are the roles of USM and APSC in the African People's Socialist Party's strategy against counterinsurgency?
Uhuru. Well,
I'm sorry.
I can't hear you now. Okay.
Uhuru?
I couldn't hear you. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Could you say that again?
Yes. So the question is, what are the roles of USM and APSC in the African People's Socialist Party's strategy against counterinsurgency?
Well, I think that it's a really important strategy to basically the strategy of the party to extend the African Revolution onto the pedestal, and that when we, from the Solidarity Committee, when we join the African People's Solidarity Committee or USM, we embrace the understandings of African internationalism. We make those our own, and we the chairman has said, and this is something that could almost be part 2 of this article, but the chairman has said that the party's formation of APSC is what helped the party survive the counterinsurgency, because it extended, it ended the isolation. The U.S. government imposed isolation on the African Revolution and the African people and the African working class, we take it into the white communities. We're a front of the African Revolution, a conscious front, fighting for, not against racism, not against the ideas, but for white people to take on returning the stolen resources, and not as a favor, not as charity, but as a way of life, as a commitment, as an anti-imperialist stand. And that, is just so brilliant and so critical that the party has created that, and that we have to really understand that and what our relationship is, what our responsibilities are to, in this question of fighting for reparations, not in, as we said, not as charity, but the revolutionary understanding of reparations, that everything of all of imperialist wealth must be returned to the African working class. So I think it's really a critical thing, because as long as the U.S. government, or locally here in St. Louis or any place else, can attack an African community and no white person says anything about it, they keep doing that. But we have a responsibility to raise it up and fight for to fight for the right of African people to be free and liberated. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, True and Penny. I really want to appreciate that. And we have a comment on Facebook from L. Christina Ashta Veda, who says, continue to speak truth and break down the barriers of lies. We recognize that the African People's Socialist Party and the Burning Spear newspaper, showed the world how it really is, and not just, explain the world, but changing it, as we heard, True and Penny brilliantly sum up just now. Sorry, I thought we had another comment, but Uhuru. Chair Jesse, would you like to, do you have anything you would like to add?
I just really appreciate Chairwoman Penny coming on this program, and I did have a question. It's not one of the planned questions. I hope that's all right.
That's all right.
But Chairwoman Penny, I was wondering if you could speak more on how culture and ideology are used as part of the counterinsurgency. And you touched on that in your article when you talked about how, every newspaper article, every TV show that you watch, everything is about demonizing and criminalizing African people, and so many other ways that you've also spoken about how, even bourgeois academia and the development of white leftist ideology was also part of the counterinsurgency, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, I think that, if you look at the 60s and the incredible cultural explosion that the chairman always talks about in the African community in terms of music and even dance and culture in the 1960s, and it was brilliant and revolutionary. But as the counterinsurgency began to be carried out by, the early 70s, that had changed so much, so that the movies became Shaft and, just this whole other, drug dealers and, just a whole other thing.
Right.
Than the politics of what it had been. And the same with the music. The music became feel good and, and there's some amazing music of the 70s, African music of the 70s and funk and everything, but, it had lost its revolutionary quality because in the 60s, as the chairman has said so many times, the incredible outpouring of creativity and culture came from the leadership of the African working class and the revolutionary period that was created by the African Revolution. And I mean, there's so many different ways, that counterinsurgency. I mean, white people, the Rolling Stones and all these different white groups that completely, blatantly and openly stole the music and culture of African people who died in poverty.
Right.
and then turned it into a multi-billion-dollar industry that was something that turned African music into a caricature of itself as a way of attacking it, and I mean, there's just so many examples of the counterinsurgency in culture. I would also say that here in St. Louis, just in terms of the media and newspapers, every single day I read the Post-Dispatch, which is the paper here, and I just can't believe it. I'm like, I do not believe that article. Every single day there are articles after article attacking the integrity, the character, just slandering the African community in every way, never raising in the face of just dire contradictions that African people live in, that these come from severe poverty, living on $5 a day, and just all of the conditions that people live in. So yeah, definitely every form of media and culture is used as a tool to attack the African people, the African Revolution, etc. And this is why the parties, the Black Power Blueprint and the African People's Socialist Party, which on the ground has fought for every front, for the African Revolution to be everywhere in the culture, even in the churches, in hip hop and spoken word, every single thing. This is part of, and it's certainly in its own media, the Burning Spear. So, yeah, it's
Uhuru, thank you.
It's really powerful.
Uhuru. Well, I really want to appreciate you, Chairwoman Penny. I know that it's 7:51 or 6:51 your time, and I know you have an important meeting to get to put the theory into practice. So I really want to appreciate and salute you, Chairwoman Penny. Uhuru.
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 Thanks for having me on, and we'll see you soon, comrades.
Thank you.
Uhuru.
See you soon. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Reparations.
We'll see you at the plenary.
Yes. Uhuru. Speaking of which, Uhuru. Uhuru. So that was an incredible interview and study with Chairwoman Penny Hess, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the first white person to ever join under the leadership of the African Revolution. And Paula Lipsy from Arizona has a comment. So true, all elements of our white culture criminalizes African people.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to comment on that briefly. Pardon my cough here. I just really want to appreciate, that was great to have APSC Chairwoman Penny on and read that brilliant article that she wrote for the Burning Spear newspaper. And I think that one of the main takeaways for me from the article and the discussion that she was leading after the article is the all-encompassing nature of the counterinsurgency, that and our complicity in the counterinsurgency as white people, which is obvious in the form of white lynch mobs, white vigilantes, white people who vote in favor of anti-African policies, white people who emptied the gun shelves after Ferguson and stuff like that, but less obvious in pretty much everything else that we do as white people that isn't part of overturning the colonial relationship that we have to African people. And because, as Chairwoman Penny talked about, counterinsurgency is just part and parcel of colonialism. So counterinsurgency has been going on from the dawn of the colonial project, from the dawn of imperialism. It has required systematized, brutality against enslaved and colonized people, African people and others, to prevent them from fighting back and rising up. That's in the DNA of America and Europe and white power. And what Penny talks about in the article, in the 60s, because the struggle of African people reached such a high point, the counterinsurgency had to consolidate it into these organizational forms, like the COINTELPRO, Operation Chaos, MK Ultra, that heightened counterinsurgency against a particular manifestation of African revolution and resistance. And then, as the chairman has talked about, then after the 60s, the counterinsurgency was broadened to the entire African population through crack cocaine, through criminalization. Like by the beginning of the 1980s to the end of the 1980s, the rate of mass incarceration of African people doubled. The rate of horizontal violence and murder in the African community, which is colonial violence, doubled. So anyway, I just think that the only way that white people can break free from being either willing or unwitting co-conspirators in the counterinsurgency against African people is by joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and fighting for Black power and reparations to African people. That's the only way, and we have the opportunity and the ability to do that only because the vanguard party of the African working class opened the door for us to do so for strategic, brilliant scientific reasons, and also a recognition of our ability to unite with our own humanity. So I just think it's really important, like on a practical level, people should join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement if you're not already a member. I know we're going to make a call to join, but if you're not already a member, you're watching this, you're outraged, you feel disgusted by what the U.S. government has done to the Black community and continues to do, you want to do something about it, you don't want to be a part of it, you don't want that blood on your hands and that genocide in your name, then joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is the way to do that.
Exactly.
Uhuru.
So if you, as Chair Jesse said, if you're not a member, go to uhurusolidarity.org and click on the big red button, Become a Member. Mm-hmm. And if you are already a member, or you just want to think about joining for a little bit, or on all the above, you can donate or pay reparations tonight. Also at uhurusolidarity.org and click on the big red button, Pay Reparations. So become a member and or pay reparations tonight. So Uhuru, I think
Uhuru.
Really want to appreciate and salute your statement, Chair Jesse,
for
laying that out for us. So we have 4 minutes left of this study.
All right.
And anything else, Chair Jesse, you would like to add before we go into announcements?
No.
Okay.
I think Chairwoman Penny said it all.
That
was great.
Well, feel free to interrupt as we go, and same with anyone on Facebook or YouTube. If you have a comment or question, there's a couple more minutes left, so don't be afraid to put that forward. Oh, we have
the convention.
Yes.
You have that in there, I'm
Yes,
sure.
I do.
But can I say
Of
something
course.
about
Of course.
that? But you had a comment.
Yes, we have a comment from T. Gordon.
T.
Uhuru
Gordon.
comrades, thank you for teaching the revolutionary truth. Uhuru.
Uhuru T. Gordon. Where's T.
Uhuru.
Gordon tuning in from?
He's on YouTube, so I can't
Okay.
find that.
Cool.
but
Thank you.
appreciate
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already.
Yes.
And if you're watching on Facebook, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We really want to build the YouTube channel. I think we have almost 1,000 subscribers, so let's bump that up and get to 1,000 as soon as we can. And I wanted to announce the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's National Convention, April 18th and 19th in this year, 2020. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year. Happy Revolutionary New Year. And it's going to be in St. Louis, Missouri, in the Uhuru House in St. Louis, Missouri. And it's going to be an amazing convention. It's going to be our best ever national convention. If you've never been to St. Louis to see the headquarters of the Black Power Blueprint, you've got to do it. If you have been there, you need to come back because I have not seen the beautiful venue space and marketplace that's being built outside, the community garden. I mean, this thing is developing rapidly under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onozene Yeshitela, and what better opportunity to see it for your own eyes than the USM National Convention, which is just going to bring everything together. We're going to be going to the moneyed sector of white society this year in a really strong way, as mandated by our leadership in the African People's Socialist Party. We're going to be going to the prison industry, the diamond industry, Wall Street, and really struggling and intensifying our struggle to win reparations from vulnerable sectors of even the bourgeoisie that can see the writing on the wall and want to make an attempt to cast their fate with that of the African Revolution. So this is going to be a year of bold action, and the convention is going to be the place to find out how you can really be part of making this a reality. So, Uhuru.
Yes, the 2-day convention, April 18th and 19th. Our moderator will put the registration link below, so you can register, and includes food as well. And Chairman Penny Hess will be speaking there, of course, and also Chairman Amali Eshatella himself. So,
and one other thing, I know this might not have been on there, but in January of this year and in February, USM is doing a regional organizing tour. So if you're in a city somewhere, which you are, you should contact info@uhurusolidarity.org if you want the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to literally come to your city, hold an event. We will do it in your living room if you'll have us. Invite your friends and family over. We'll show a presentation, show videos of the chairman and the leadership of the party, and talk about building the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. This is a recruitment tour, so bring the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to your city, wherever you're located. And again, you can contact info@uhurusolidarity.org.
That in the comments there. And so, yes, definitely come to the convention. And then I want to let you all know that our next reparations study group, this coming Thursday, our 5th episode will be called White People Who Want Socialism, Fight for Reparations to African People. And our moderator will put the link to RSVP to that. And it will be on Facebook, YouTube, same time, same place. And our featured speaker is our own national chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Jesse Nevel, reading an article you wrote for the January Spear. So I'm very much looking forward to that. We are at 8 p.m., so I'm just going to dive quickly into the African People's Socialist Party's first plenary or planning conference of the 7th Congress is in a month. It's in a month, February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in St. Petersburg, Florida, here. And you can register for that at apspplenary.org. It's $40 per day. It includes food, reports from all the different sections of the Uhuru movement, all the different organizations, building Black African political and economic power in the hands of the African working class. And of course, the Solidarity Movement will have a presentation as well. About how we are building a movement for reparations. So, definitely come to that February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, whether for all 3 days or just one. So, Uhuru. And so we're at 8:01 right now. And I just want to make sure there's no outstanding comments or questions before we close out. Virginia Wilson says Uhuru in all caps. So, Uhuru, Virginia.
Wilson.
All right. So, I really want to appreciate all of you for tuning in. And feel free to share this with a family member, a friend, and get the word out so that we can have such incredible studies moving forward. So unity through
reparations.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.